There are people who spend years quietly holding an entire family together, paying the bills, fixing what breaks, making sure everything doesn't fall apart, only to be treated like they don't matter in their own home, while their children are pushed aside as if it's completely normal. People say family isn't supposed to be transactional, but when all the sacrifice only goes one way, is that love, or just quiet exploitation? And when the moment comes, do you keep enduring, or finally walk away and force everything to change? Before we dive into today's story, let us know where you're tuning in from. It's always amazing to see where our stories travel. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next twist in this journey. Now, let's listen to her from the heart. I remember the warmth first. That's the part that always tricks you. The smell of pot roast drifting through the house, the soft crackle of the fireplace, the low hum of voices overlapping in the living room. Cedar Grove in late November always had that kind of cold that made stepping inside feel like stepping into something safe, something familiar. This house had always been that place. My father bought it with a VA loan and a handshake, and for years, it stood as proof that we were something solid. I walked in carrying a pie I had made from his recipe, the same one he taught me when I was 14, standing on a stool because I couldn't reach the counter. Brown butter, extra nutmeg, always that extra pinch he said mattered more than people thought. In my other hand, a gift bag with a new tablecloth, ivory linen. I bought it because Mom mentioned hers had a stain. Caleb followed behind me with the suitcases. Milo held the bag with both hands like it mattered. Nora had her stuffed rabbit tucked under her arm, already asking if Grandma had cookies. For a moment, I let myself believe what I always believed when I stepped into that house. That I belonged here, that no matter how much time had passed, I was still the daughter of this home. Then I noticed the coats. 5 hooks by the door, all taken, Brielle's red jacket, her kids' things, Mom's cardigan. There was no space left, so I draped ours over the banister. It felt small at the time, something easy to ignore, but small things are how it always starts. The guest room door was already closed. Laughter spilled out from behind it. Haley and Ethan, settled in, comfortable, shoes lined neatly by the bed, their space claimed before we even arrived. Dinner went the way it always did. 11 people around the table, Mom at the head, Brielle to her right, me somewhere to the side, between Caleb and Milo. I spread the tablecloth before we ate. No one said anything about it. The pie sat on the counter untouched. Mom said grace. She thanked God for family, for health, for the food. She thanked Brielle for being strong this year, for everything she had been through. When she got to me, she smiled, warm and practiced. And Elowen, thank you for always being here. Always being here. Not for what I did, not for what I carried. Just here. After dinner, I washed dishes. Caleb helped the kids settle in the living room. Brielle dried one plate, then said her back hurt and disappeared onto the couch. Mom called out from the other room, "Let her rest, honey. She's had a rough week." By 8:30, Milo's eyes were heavy. Nora was already curled up, one shoe missing. I found Mom in the hallway. "Should I set up the guest room for the kids?" I asked. "I can put them on the floor in there." She didn't hesitate, not even for a second. "Oh, honey," she said, reaching for the closet door. "Brielle's kids are already settled. You know how Haley is. If we move her, she won't sleep at all." Then she opened the closet and pulled out 2 sleeping bags, thin, faded, the kind that smelled like they hadn't been touched in years. She tossed them. One landed near Milo's feet. The other slid across the floor toward Nora. "You and the kids can just sleep out here," she added lightly. "Or in the car, if you'd be more comfortable." For a second, I didn't move. Milo didn't pick up the sleeping bag. He just stood there, hands at his sides, watching my face. 6 years old, already trying to understand something he shouldn't have to understand. Nora picked hers up immediately and hugged it. "Is this for me, Mommy?" Brielle leaned against the guest room doorway, arms crossed, watching. She smiled in that way that always felt like a quiet win. "Should booked a hotel," she said. I looked around the room. Coats. 5. Photos on the wall. 7. I was in one of them, barely visible in the background, holding a cake at Brielle's birthday. Steps to the front door. I counted them without thinking. 14. And in that moment, something shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, just clearly. I had never had a place here, not as a guest, not really as family. I was the one who showed up when something needed to be done. The one who filled in the gaps nobody talked about. The one who made things work quietly enough that no one had to notice. I knelt in front of my kids. "Pack your things, babies," I whispered. Caleb didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. He read my face, the same way Milo had just seconds before, and started moving. Suitcases off the banister. Nora's rabbit from the couch, Milo's coat from the chair. By 11 p.m. we were walking out. Mom stood in the doorway behind us. "Don't be dramatic, Elowen," she called. "It's just one night." I didn't turn around. because it was never just one night, it was 20 years. The first time my mother called me after my father died, she didn't cry. That was always the thing about her. She saved her tears for the right audience. On the phone, with me, she was calm, controlled, almost gentle. "Honey," she said, "I'm a little confused by the mortgage statement. Your father always handled this, and the numbers don't look right." I drove to Cedar Grove that weekend and sat at the same kitchen table where we had just had Thanksgiving dinner years later. Same chairs, same light coming through the window, different weight in the air. The mortgage was almost everything she made. After utilities, groceries, and insurance, she was short every month. Not by a little, by enough that the house wouldn't last long. "What about Brielle?" I asked. Mom gave me that look, the patient one, the one she used when she wanted to make something obvious feel unreasonable. "Honey, your sister is going through a lot right now. I can't put this on her." So I did the math, and then I made the decision. I set up auto pay. It started with the mortgage, just that, just enough to keep things stable, just until things got better. But things didn't get better, they expanded. Insurance came next. Then the furnace went out in January. Colorado cold that cut straight through walls. I paid for the replacement. Brielle sent a text, "Thank God Mom's okay, that was it." Then came the roof, then the kitchen repairs. Then, Haley's gymnastics tuition. Every time something broke or slipped or needed to be covered, the call came to me, and every time I said yes. Caleb watched it happen from the beginning. I still remember the night I told him I set up the first payment. He closed his laptop slowly and looked at me like he was trying to solve something that didn't make sense. "You're not her bank account, Elowen," he said. "She's my mother," I answered. "What am I supposed to do? Let her lose the house?" He didn't argue after that. But he didn't agree either. The payments became routine, quiet, invisible. Month after month, the money left my account and held everything together. And no one talked about it. Not really, I didn't ask. Mom didn't explain. The system just worked. And I told myself that was enough. At some point, I started keeping track. That's what I told myself. Just to stay organized. Just to know what I could afford. But the numbers kept growing. Mortgage, insurance, repairs, tuition. Row after row, line after line. I would scroll through it sometimes late at night. After the kids were asleep, my phone glowing in the dark. It didn't feel like a budget. It felt like a record of everything I had given, and everything no one had ever named. By the time 4 years passed, the total had crossed a number I stopped saying out loud. Over $120,000. No one knew, no one asked, because the system didn't require them to. I was 9 years old the first time I understood my place in the family. Not with words. I didn't have those yet. With a feeling Dad was in the hospital, the first scare. Something on a scan. They needed to keep him overnight. Mom moved quickly, efficiently, like she always did in moments that mattered. She packed a bag for Brielle, pink backpack, favorite blanket, stuffed animal coming to you, she told her. "You'll stay there for a few days." I stood in the hallway holding my own backpack. Blue, broken zipper. I had packed it myself. "What about me?" I asked. Mom looked at me, not unkindly. "Just certain. You're my strong one, Elowen," she said. "You can handle it." That was it. Brielle left, the house got quiet, and I stayed. I remember walking 3 blocks in the dark to the neighbor's house because that was the plan. No one asked if I was scared. No one walked me there. I didn't cry. I counted steps instead. That night, something settled into place inside me. Brielle gets taken care of. Elowen handles it. And that pattern didn't change. It just got bigger. Brielle struggled through adulthood the same way she always had. Jobs that didn't last, relationships that fell apart, responsibilities that slipped through her hands. And every time there was a reason. "She's sensitive. She's going through a lot. She just needs time." Mom said those things so often they stopped sounding like explanations and started sounding like rules. Meanwhile, I worked, paid bills, built a life piece by piece. And when something broke in the family, I fixed it. I didn't question it. Because somewhere along the way, I had confused being needed with being loved. I thought if I kept showing up, kept carrying things no one else would carry, eventually it would mean something. Eventually someone would see it. But that night, standing in the living room, watching Milo stare at that sleeping bag on the floor, I saw it clearly for the first time. I saw myself, 9 years old, standing in a hallway, being told I could handle it, and I realized something that hadn't fully formed until that moment. If I didn't stop, he would learn the same lesson. He would learn to stand still, to stay quiet, to take what was given without asking why. He would learn to earn his place by carrying what no one else wanted to hold. And I couldn't let that happen. That's why I left at 11 p.m. Not because of the sleeping bags, but because it was the first time I understood exactly what they meant. We pulled out of Cedar Grove at exactly 11:07 p.m. I know the time because I looked at the dashboard clock as Caleb turned onto the main road, the house disappearing behind us in the rearview mirror. The porch light stayed on. My mother stood in the doorway, arms folded, not coming after us. Rain started a few minutes later. Not heavy, just a thin, steady drizzle that stretched the taillights ahead of us into long red lines. The kind of rain that makes everything feel farther away than it is. Inside the car, no one spoke. Caleb kept both hands on the wheel, eyes forward, steady. He didn't ask me what I wanted to do next. He didn't tell me I overreacted. He didn't say anything at all. That was how I knew he understood. In the back seat, Milo sat upright, still holding his coat, not looking out the window, not asking questions. Just quiet in a way that didn't belong to a 6-year-old. Nora had already curled up, the sleeping bag pulled across her lap like a blanket. She had tucked her rabbit inside it, like she was trying to make it feel like something warm. The silence wasn't anger. It wasn't even sadness, not exactly. It was heavier than that. It was clarity. I stared out at the road, watching the mile markers pass, and my mind did what it had always done when things didn't make sense. It started counting. Not emotions, not words. Number miles between towns, seconds between the wipers. Payments I had made, years I had spent. The pie was still on the floor in front of my feet. I hadn't brought it inside when we arrived. I'd set it on the porch, then picked it up again when we left without thinking. Now the whole car smelled like brown butter and nutmeg. It hit me in a way it never had before. My father. I could see him standing in the kitchen at 6 a.m. on Thanksgiving mornings, sleeves rolled up, measuring flour with a kind of focus that made everything else feel secondary. He never let anyone help except me. Said it was because I paid attention. The house doesn't hold itself up, kid, he used to say. Back then I thought he meant chores. Maintenance, the kind of things that keep a place running. Now, sitting in that car, I understood what he meant. Someone always carries the weight. And for 4 years, that someone had been me. I didn't say it out loud, but the thought settled in with a kind of finality I couldn't ignore anymore. Every payment, every repair, every quiet transfer that kept my mother's life intact. I had been holding that house up. The rain picked up slightly, tapping against the windshield in a rhythm that felt almost deliberate. Caleb's right hand left the steering wheel for a second and rested on the center console, palm up. I placed my hand in his without looking at him. He squeezed once. That was enough. A memory surfaced, uninvited but sharp. You're her daughter, not her bank account. I remembered the exact tone. Not angry, not even frustrated. Just certain. At the time, I had brushed it aside. Told myself he didn't understand. Told myself this was what family meant. Now, for the first time, I heard it clearly. I had called it sacrifice. But it wasn't sacrifice if it never stopped, if it became expected, if it became invisible. It was a system that only worked because I kept feeding it. And the moment I stopped, everything would shift. Milo stirred slightly in the back seat, then went still again. I glanced at him in the rearview mirror, catching his reflection for a second. I saw myself, not now, not as I was, but at 9 years old, standing in that hallway with a backpack I had packed myself, being told I was strong enough to handle things alone. I had carried that sentence for 20 years, and now my son was learning the same lesson, in a different house, under a different set of lights. My chest tightened, not from pain but from recognition. If I didn't stop, nothing would change. Not for me, not for him. By the time we reached the highway out of Cedar Grove, I knew something with a certainty I hadn't felt before. This wasn't about a sleeping arrangement. It never had been. It was about what I had allowed to continue, and what I was about to end. I didn't sleep. Not really. I lay in bed listening to the quiet of our house, the kind of quiet that felt different now. Caleb slept beside me, steady, grounded. Down the hall, both kids were in their own beds, under their own blankets, exactly where they belonged. Every room had a place for someone. That thought stayed with me until morning. By the time the sun came up, I was already in the kitchen. Black Friday. The rest of the country was lining up outside stores, chasing deals and discounts. I sat at my table with a cup of coffee, my laptop open, my phone beside it. Caleb moved around behind me, making breakfast. Pancakes, butter melting in the pan. The smell filled the room in a way that felt honest, uncomplicated. Milo and Nora sat on the floor in the living room, watching a parade rerun, arguing over which balloon was bigger. Normal sounds. A normal morning. I logged into my banking app. The list loaded in seconds. Payments lined up neatly, each one with a date, an amount, a destination, a system I had built piece by piece without ever calling it that. Mortgage, insurance, tuition, repairs. I stared at the first one for a long time. Then I clicked it. There was no dramatic pause. No warning that what I was about to do would change anything. Just a button. Cancel. A confirmation screen. Are you sure? Yes. That was it. 4 years of payments ended in less than 10 seconds. The screen refreshed. The line disappeared. For a moment, I expected to feel something bigger. Relief, guilt, fear. Instead, I felt still, like something had finally settled into place. I moved to the next one, insurance. I called the provider, explained I was removing myself as the responsible party. The woman on the phone didn't ask questions. She processed the request, told me the next bill would go directly to my mother. Done. Tuition. I logged into the account, removed my card, confirmed the change. Done. Roof project. A quick message to the contractor. Cancel the work. Refund the deposit. Done. Each step was clean, precise. Not because it didn't matter, but because I had already made the decision the night before. By the time I was finished, the list was empty. No more transfers. No more obligations tied to my name. I sat there for a moment, hands flat on the table, looking at the screen. Then I opened my spreadsheet. Every payment I had made was there. Every month, every amount, every detail. I scrolled through it slowly, not to calculate, but to see it. The total sat at the bottom, over $120,000. I didn't feel anger looking at it. I felt something sharper, recognition, not of the money, of what it represented. Years of being present but unseen, needed but not acknowledged. Counted only when something had to be covered. I took screenshots of everything, saved them in a folder. I named it proof. Not for anyone else, for me. For the moment when someone would try to rewrite the story. When someone would say I hadn't done enough, hadn't shown up, hadn't tried. I closed the laptop. Caleb set a plate in front of me, pancakes still warm. You okay? He asked. I canceled everything, I said. He nodded once. Good. No hesitation, no follow-up, just good. From the living room, Nora's voice rang out asking for whipped cream. Caleb stood, grabbed the can from the fridge, handed it to her. Normal. Simple. Uncomplicated. For the first time in 4 years, my life didn't extend beyond the walls of my own home, and I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to before. I had never been responsible for holding theirs together. The first call came on Sunday morning. I was in the bathroom, helping Milo brush his teeth when my phone buzzed on the counter. I glanced at the screen. Mom. I let it ring. It stopped. Then started again. I finished helping Milo, rinsed the sink, dried my hands, and picked up the phone. One voicemail. Her voice was calm, light. Hey, honey. I think there's some kind of issue with the bank. They said a payment didn't go through. Probably just a glitch. Call me when you can. A glitch. I set the phone down. For 4 years, everything had worked perfectly. Now it was a glitch. The calls multiplied. More missed calls before noon. 2 messages. Lauren, the bank called again. I don't understand what's going on. I need you to call me. This is important. Important. Not once did she ask if I was okay. Not once did she mention Thursday night. By the time I got home from work, there were more. Caleb's phone rang that evening. He answered it in the kitchen while I stood at the sink, drying dishes. Hey, Brielle. Her voice carried through the speaker, sharp, irritated. Something about a payment bouncing, something about me forgetting to update my card. Forgetting. Like it had always been automatic, like it had always been my job. Caleb listened for a few seconds. Then he said calmly, maybe you should help her out. Silence. Then he ended the call. He didn't look at me right away, just set his phone down and went back to loading the dishwasher. 20 minutes later, my phone lit up. A message from Brielle. This is really unfair. I'm going through a lot right now and you're just going to let Mom deal with this? I can't believe you're being this selfish. Selfish. I read it twice, not a single question, not a single acknowledgement. Just expectation. Tuesday, it spread. Aunt Carol called, left a voicemail about how worried Mom was. A family friend from church reached out saying I had been distant. Uncle Mark called twice, didn't leave a message. By Wednesday, my call log looked like something I didn't recognize. Names, numbers, repeats. I scrolled through it once, slowly. 198 missed calls. I counted them without thinking, and as I looked at the list, something became clear in a way it hadn't before. Not one of those calls asked what happened that night. Not one. No one asked why I left. No one asked why my kids were packing their bags at 11 p.m. No one asked about the sleeping bags. They asked about money. They asked about payments. They asked about what had stopped working. But not about me. I set my phone down. For years, I had answered every call. Explained, fixed, covered. This time I didn't. Not because I didn't have something to say, but because silence for once was more honest than anything I could explain. And for the first time since I was 9 years old, I let it stay that way. I arrived early. That part hadn't changed. I still counted time the way I always had, building in space before anything important, as if preparation could somehow steady what came next. The coffee shop in Denver was quiet, the kind of place where conversations stayed low and private, even when they carried weight. I chose a table in the corner, not hidden but not exposed either, neutral ground. That mattered more than I wanted to admit. The folder sat in my bag beside me. I had gone through it twice that morning. Every statement printed, every payment highlighted. 4 years, last black and white, no emotion, no interpretation. That was all I needed. When my mother walked in, she was exactly 3 minutes late. She looked the same as she always did, composed, put together, the kind of presence that made people assume everything around her was under control. She spotted me immediately, her expression softening into something familiar. Concern. Or something that looked like it. "Hi, honey," she said as she sat down. "I've been worried about you." She reached for her cup before even looking at the table, as if easing herself into the moment would somehow reshape it. "I don't understand what's been going on. You haven't answered any of my calls." Her voice stayed light, careful, centered on me, not the problem. That was how she always started. I didn't respond right away. I reached into my bag, pulled out the folder, and set it between us. She looked down at it, then back at me. "What's this?" "Open it," I said. She hesitated, just for a second, then flipped it open. The first page was the mortgage. Monthly payments, neatly listed, dates aligned, amounts circled. She scanned it quickly at first, like she expected to find a mistake, then slower. Her fingers stilled on the edge of the paper. "That's the mortgage," she said. "Yes." Her eyes moved to the next page, insurance, repairs, tuition, each one laid out the same way. Clean, precise, unavoidable. She flipped another page, then another. "How much is all of this?" she asked quietly. 124,000, I said. The number sat there between us. She didn't react immediately, not the way most people would. No sudden movement, no raised voice. Just a stillness that looked almost controlled. "I didn't know it was that much," she said. "You didn't ask," I replied. She closed the folder slowly, pressing her hand flat against the cover as if holding it down could contain what it represented. "Elowen," she began, her voice soft again. "You're making this bigger than it needs to be." It was one night. Brielle's kids were already settled. "It wasn't one night," I said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't lean forward. I didn't argue. I just said it. It was 4 years. She looked at me, really looked this time, like she was trying to find the version of me that would soften the conversation. The version that would take a step back and smooth things over. That version wasn't there. "It was 4 years of payments," I continued. 4 years of covering everything. Every time something came up, I handled it. Not because anyone asked me to directly, but because it was expected. "That's not fair," she said quickly. "I never expected." "You did," I said. The words landed clean. "You just never had to say it out loud." Silence filled the space between us, heavier than anything she could have said. "I'm grateful," she said. "You know I am." "You know I am." I held her gaze. "No," I said, "you weren't." She inhaled, sharp enough to break the rhythm she had been trying to maintain. "I didn't realize." "That's the point," I said. "You didn't realize. Because you didn't have to." The air shifted. Not dramatically, not visibly, but enough that something settled into place. For the first time in my life, I wasn't adjusting my words to protect her reaction. I was just saying what was true. "What do you want me to do?" she asked. It was the first honest question she had asked since she sat down. "I'm not paying anymore," I said. "That part is done." She nodded slowly, processing, recalculating. "You can talk to Brielle," I continued. "She can help, or you can sell the house. Those are your options." Her eyes flickered at that. Sell the house. For a moment I saw it, the realization of what that would mean. The shift from something held together quietly to something that required visible change. "That house is your father's," she said. "I know," I replied, and I honored that. For 4 years, I let the words sit there. I'm not going to lose myself trying to hold it together anymore. She looked down at her hands. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then quietly, almost reluctantly, she said, "Thank you." It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't emotional. But it was real. The first time she had said it in 4 years. Not when I was paying, not when everything was working now. When it had stopped, I nodded once, then stood up. I didn't take the folder. I left it there on the table. "Are you leaving?" she asked. "Yes." "Elowen." I paused, just long enough to acknowledge her voice. Then I walked out. Not because I was angry, but because there was nothing left to explain. The house felt different when I got back. Not because anything had changed physically. The same walls. The same kitchen, the same worn cabinet handles we had talked about replacing for years. But the space felt settled, like something that had been stretched too far had finally snapped back into place. Milo was on the floor in the living room, building something out of blocks. Nora sat beside him, her rabbit tucked under her arm, talking to it like it could answer. Caleb looked up when I walked in. "How did it go?" he asked. "I set my keys on the counter." "She knows," I said. He nodded, like that was enough. Because it was. That afternoon, I drove to the store. Not for groceries. Not for anything we needed in the usual sense. I walked straight to the aisle with camping gear. Sleeping bags lined the shelves. Bright colors, thick fabric, neatly rolled. I picked 2. Good ones. Warm, durable. The kind meant to be used, not forgotten in a closet. When I got home, Milo looked up first. "What's that?" he asked. I set the bags down in front of them. "For you guys," I said. Nora clapped her hands immediately, dropping her rabbit for a second before grabbing it again. Milo hesitated, then unrolled one carefully, running his hand along the inside. "These don't smell," he said. I smiled. "No," I said, "they don't." He climbed inside, pulling it up to his chin, testing it out. "It's warm," he said, a little surprised. Nora zipped hers halfway, sitting inside it like it was something new and exciting, not something handed down as an afterthought. "Are we camping?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "We will, soon." Caleb came in from the kitchen with 4 mugs of hot chocolate, setting them down one by one. We sat together on the living room floor. No fireplace, no large dining table, no extra rooms, just us. Milo counted the marshmallows in his cup out loud, one by one. Nora tried to keep up, losing track halfway and starting over. I watched them, not as a moment I needed to hold on to, but as something that finally made sense. No one here had to earn their place. No one here was being measured. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for something to go wrong. I thought about my father, about the mornings in the kitchen, about the way he moved through the house, fixing things before anyone noticed they needed fixing. The house doesn't hold itself up. I understood that. But I also understood something else now. It wasn't meant to be carried by one person alone, not like I had been doing. That night, after the kids in the hallway for a moment looking at their doors, closed, quiet, safe. No one had been pushed aside. No one had been told to handle it. I didn't cut my family off. I didn't disappear. I just stepped out of the role that had been handed to me before I knew I had a choice. And in doing that, everything changed. Not all at once, not perfectly, but enough. Enough that I could finally see it clearly. I hadn't lost my family. I had just stopped being the invisible foundation of something that was never built to hold me.